I beat 4 FIDE masters in a row, and today the question I want to pose is, are bishops better than knights? As always in chess, of course it depends. Open board, bishops are better, closed board, knights are better, but that's just generic. We don't like generic. Sometimes you can have an open board and a knight can out or overpower a bishop. Two of those games today are open positions where I had a knight versus a bishop, and I still won both those games. I'm going to include the 2 games after that because I beat 4 FIDE masters in a row, and I'm pretty happy about that. This was Blitz on chess.com, but let's get into it. Okay, so white here starts with the ready defense. The ready defense being knight f3. You can play many things against it. Sometimes I play the Dutch. I'm not going to mention the Dutch many more times on this channel because I feel like 80% of my channel is the Dutch. I don't like when they play the King's Indian attack. So here I'm just going to be like, okay, I'm going to fianchetto and then I'm going to double fianchetto, right? When in doubt, double fianchetto. He also double fianchettos. So we're going to get some tension in the center. I go e6 to go d5. He goes d3 to go e4. So we're going to meet in the center now. Now, queen c1 is a fascinating move, honestly. He guards the bishop, so there's never going to be any discoveries, any tactics that I have with the knight. I clarify in the center, and another very smart move, he goes knight to g5 because now this pawn is pinned to my bishop. So don't try, guarding the pawn, saving the pawn. That pawn is lost. Accept it. I counterclaim in the center on the dark squares so that his bishop will always hit air, and then I unpin my bishop. So now I am threatening to take and be up a pawn. So now he's forced to take. We get a clarification in the center of the board. I clarify some more, and then I move my rook, because if I didn't move my rook, I would lose my rook. I don't want to lose my rook. Now we get h4. Flank pawn push. When the center is dealt with, which it is very good to push flank pawns. People crumble. However, I know people crumble, and I'm not going to start pushing pawns on my king side and weakening everything. So I go for this trade. And see, this is an open board, so everybody would be like a bishop is better than a knight. But look at his structure. He has a bunch of holes in the position. His bishop hits air on the queen side because my pawns are on the dark squares. And I have faith in my knight, to be honest, to do some damage. So I start maneuvering it. He keeps pushing his flank pawn. And now I move my king to g7 just so that he can't go h6. My idea is that if he goes rook h1, right, it looks like a very good move. I'm going to move my knight, and now my king can get to f6. A centralized king will win you some endgames. King is the best piece in the endgame. Another generic rule, but it stands true more often. So he maneuvers his rook. I'm still maneuvering my knight. Looks like I'm picking up a pawn, and I am. Looks like he has rook a1 to win my pawn back, but he doesn't because tempo gainer. See, holes in the position, exploiting it. Now, here, yes, you could deal with the pawn, but what's the best piece in the endgame? King f6, gaining a tempo on the rook. Now when the rook moves back, you could opt to go a5, but pawn moves are very, very committal. So I go rook d7, guarding it like this, and maybe in a future world, I'll be happy that I have a rook on the 8th and rook on the 7th, so they can double up. Might be foreshadowing right there. g4, expanding on the king side. Now I push a pawn, and I'm happy with this position. He goes over towards the h file to try to win, so I do go back. I don't really want to go king g5, though maybe it was possible. King g7, I feel safe. Now his piece is tied down to his bishop. I get the doubled up rooks on the f file. He gets the doubled up on the h file, but I'm active. He is passive. Easier to win when you are active in endgames. Exploiting the pin. He gets out of it. In my eyes, he got out of it so that this didn't come with check. He was low on time, so I'm not going to chastise him. He does drop a bishop, however, and then check, take on c2. He blunders a rook in time pressure and then resigns. So this was a game where it was an open board, but a knight outshined a bishop. Here's going to be another game. So this was right. Well, actually, that was the 4th game. Then I played this guy 3 times, and then he didn't want none. He didn't want no more. He stopped asking me for rematches. So I got a Caro-Kann. I've been getting g6 a lot. I don't know if someone made a video on it. I know it's a line. I don't know. I'll figure out how to play against it. But for now, we're pushing flank pawns because he's fianchettoing and h5 looks cool. So he goes h5. Now we soften his fianchetto on the king side, which I like. I'm going to guard the center, going to get the bishop to d3, playing it in a Tarrasch fashion with knight to d2. He takes and I take with the bishop. In hindsight, probably I would have taken with the knight. Makes more sense. But for some reason, I wanted a bishop on f3, even though he has a pawn on c6. I can't explain what I was thinking. I was just playing. So he goes castles. I go knight g3, trying to jump into the center, and then I do. He offers up a trade. I accept, and then bishop to g5. Looked about good to me. Bishop g4, I take his knight, removing the defender from the bishop. So if he takes my dark squared bishop, for example, I would just win a pawn and then win the game. But he didn't do that. He took the knight on f3. I took back, and now he took back with the bishop. Oh boy, now we get the computer judgments on the board, so you're going to see all these question marks. Computer is rude. Rook to h3, I am going over to the g file. I want to checkmate my opponent. I decline the trade, and then I accept the trade just on my own terms. Could take with the rook, could take with the knight. Now I double up because I was like, hey, maybe I'm going to castle. And I'm like, oh, that's a trap. Queen takes a2. So I don't want none of that. Rook over to the e file, open e file, semi-open e file, aiming at the e pawn. And bishop f6 doesn't really make sense to me. That is guarded. Maybe he wanted to tie me down there, but now there's no pin. I could go king d2, develop. I didn't want to castle because my king would be further away from the center. I liked it better more in the center. Now I untie my knight, creating the pawn chain. And now our knight goes to work. See, he could have traded and it would have been equal, but he was like, I like bishop better than a knight. And I guess this isn't really an open position. This would probably be more of a closed position. So my apologies. Knight c5. What is the point? Well, the point is if they waste a move, I have rook takes e6. And if they take, I have a fork. And you might say, well, what if they take your knight? This is true, but then I'll take their pawn. And you might be like, what if they take your pawn? And I'd be like, I would take their pawn with check. And then I would be up a pawn, and hopefully I would win that game. So we got rook to f3, setting up another tactic. What is the tactic? Rook takes f6. King takes knight fork. Knights are tricky, man. They really are. He goes bishop to e7, avoiding that tactic, but falling into another one. Knight d7, and believe it or not, he resigned here. You might say, why did he resign? This looks like a one-move threat. Well, it's a one-move threat that follows into another threat. So it's not a one-move threat. Point is, if he goes rook e8, I have knight e5. I hit the rook. I hit the pawn. He moves the rook. I win the pawn with check. A premature resignation, but, you know, that's kind of nice. A lot of people play till checkmate, but when someone resigns, you're like, oh, you respected my play? You think I'm going to win the one game? That is a hard thing to do. So those were two games where the knight overpowered the bishop. I did play this guy 3 times in a row. That's why I got 4 wins against FIDE Masters in a row. This one was nearly a flawless game by me. I was happy to see that. I got judged at 94% accuracy, and I love c5. I feel like c5 is what people who play d4 do not want to deal with, especially London players. I should make a series on the London. The London is a fun one to play against, at least. So I am out of theory. I don't really know what I'm doing. Although I know this structure is kind of like a Tartakower, so we know that. Although I always do get nervous in these positions. I'm like, my opponents definitely know more than me. So I'm the noob. I'm the one that clarifies in the center. And now I feel safe. Now I'm like, okay, they're definitely out of theory because I just clarified everything. And all my pieces are out, happy, and active. Bring both my rooks to the D and the C file, as does he. So it's a very balanced position. But there are tricks, such as bishop takes. Now, after queen takes, knight e5 comes with a tempo. He goes queen g3. Look at this diagonal. It's all packed up. Looking for some sort of attack. But then I put his queen in a discovered attack. He moves his queen, but do you see why this is a blunder? Queen h4, knight g6. Where does this queen go? If you look at the board, it indeed is trapped. So he resigns here. Now we got him on tilt. So the third game, you know how chess is when you're on tilt. Luckily, I went on like a fat win streak yesterday and then fell out of my slump, got above 25-50 again. So I was happy about that. Okay, a6, b5. He's playing the O'Kelly. He's on tilt. He is being very aggressive. Queen e2 says dubious. I like the knight d1 rotation. So I don't really care what the computer says. This game, I'm not saying is a great game. It was just a continuation of the win streak, so I'm inputting it. G3, I'm going for the fianchetto. I can't go G4, unfortunately. Cannot play the freak attack that we referenced yesterday. Go watch the Sicilian video. I was kind of proud of that video, even though I did stutter about 6 times. So D5, counterclaiming in the center, and here bishop G2, just developing. He goes b4 because if I move my knight, he ends up winning this pawn. so I can't win my knight. I can lose a pawn on my own terms. E5, he takes, I take, he takes, I don't take. If I take, I lose my rook. So knight e5, centralizing the knight, pinning the central pawn, threatening to win the pawn back. So he takes and I take with the bishop. Discovered attack, open file. Activity over material, 9 times out of 10. I'll take activity any day. So rook b1, discovered attack on the bishop. Queen c7, a logical move wanting to guard the bishop, and then I just castle. Happy with my position. I'm down a pawn, but I feel like I'm winning. Bishop d6, trying to get castled, but when they move the bishop, common in like French ideas, on the queen side, common in Owen's ideas, or French ideas, vice versa. Depends which side you're on. Aiming at g7, the softened square. He goes queen f5, guarding the pawn, but now queen h5. If he moves the king to d8, I have a fork. If he moves the king to e7, I also have a fork. Also, maybe I could go queen f7, but that doesn't look like there's mate there. So I would just pick up the exchange. I pick up the exchange this way. He thought, hey, I'm pinning you. You can't take the rook. I'm going to win a piece. Maybe he forgot about this bishop. But the bishop was there, so I took the rook, and I'm also threatening his own bishop now. Queen g5, I don't like queen g5. It kind of puts my queen in a box, but, you know, I make mistakes, as does everybody. I make more, apparently, than most people. But pawn takes. Yeah, I didn't want to take this knight, but I felt I had to. I felt like he would just pick up a pawn and go back to b4, so I took. Apparently, I was wrong. Apparently, computer is just saying I'm horrible at chess, but that's what computers do. c3, right? If he takes, I pick up a bishop. He could block, so I don't pick up the queen there. And then I exchange and guard my rook like this. Rook on the first, rook on the second. I am happy about that. Rook on the third, rook on the second. I am, you know, indifferent to that, but I had to do it, I felt like. And apparently every move we're making is mistakes. So, yeah, don't play chess like me, I guess. That is the moral of the story. So I'm trying to get my queen out to h3 and g2, maneuver it over. Go rook c1 because I am happy with this trade. And after king takes, again, apparently every move I'm doing is a mistake, but computer's mean. Rook c2, I am threatening a mating box or to pick up material. He does blunder, and now it is just a matter of time till I infiltrate on the weak squares. Queen g7, allowing me to check. Now when he blocks, I do trade queens because the bishop will be won. And I think he played on a little bit, but I mean, yeah, I don't need to explain this. I just checkmated him. Or he resigned shortly before. I don't remember how far the game went. It was interesting. I think he had to go queen f7 because if he, or I'm sorry, I think he, yeah, had to go queen f7 because if he went king d8, just take that obviously, and there will be an ensuing mate shortly afterwards. So I beat 4 FIDE Masters in a row. Didn't play well on one of the games. The other 3 games, I was happy with my play though. Hope you enjoyed this. Yeah, my other question is, I don't know if I should double upload, like, because I love doing the opening videos, and I could do 2 videos a day. I just don't know if there's a point, because are people going to watch 2 videos a day? Probably not. So I probably need to be patient and upload just once a day, but I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.